Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today we will continue the slipper orchids update. These are the mottled-leaf Paphiopedilums, which I think deserve a video of their own because just a couple of months ago I made another update on these guys and I was telling you back then that I do have some issues with them. I'll use some footage from that update, but you can find the entire video linked down below in the description. So I will just compare how they look now to how they looked just 2 months ago because there is a major difference. So to recap a little bit, what were the issues? Well, leaf tip dieback, but it's not really like the Paphiopedilums. You remember yesterday I told you the Paphiopedilums had dry dieback. Well, the Paphs don't have dry dieback. It looks like this. It's not wet. It doesn't look like an infection, like a bacteria, like anything of the sorts. It just continues to take over the leaf slowly but surely if I don't cut it. Sometimes, even if I cut it, it continues and then at some point it stops and just afterwards the leaf dries, but it is black as you can see. So I don't think it actually is an infection of the sorts because it is way too selective, and when it comes to pathogens, they're not all that selective. Yes, they can be specialized to certain varieties or species, but rotting and stuff, they kind of take over other plants as well. And being that I fixed the issue, actually I believe I did, and it did not imply fungicides or anything of the sorts, I still believe it's not really an infection. It doesn't appear to be. So before we start talking about the mottled-leaf Paphs, let's look at the little guy in the corner there. This is the American hybrid. He is a green-leafed Paph, but he's not a multifloral. I think he's the easiest hybrid you can find on the market. You can find him at flower shops and garden centers. He's really a very popular orchid. And I did a little experiment. I had him in an organic in Ceramis and Leca, and I wanted to see if he does better in a terrestrial mix, and I don't see any difference. I think this guy works great in Leca or semi-hydroponics or Ceramis, just as well as organic mediums such as terrestrial mix or even bark combined with sphagnum moss. I had him a lot of years ago into a mix of the sorts. But you know, I just wanted to see which is better. I cannot say that one is better than the other, so the difference will be made by preference. I prefer this guy in semi-hydro. I think I will transfer him in semi-hydro, and that's about it. Great, let's move on to the mottled-leafed Paphs. What do we see in this picture? We see one that has some dieback and some others which do not have dieback. What did I do? What did I change? The medium. I changed them from semi-hydroponics and inorganic in general to organic. I placed them into what I call a terrestrial mix. This is a mixture of bark with a little bit of coconut husk and coconut coir, and each of them actually has a little bit of a different mixture, but in essence it's the same. So let's take them one by one and see the differences. Now, first of all, the reason why I placed them in a terrestrial mix is that these orchids are actually terrestrials or semi-terrestrials, or sometimes they can be lithophytes. This actually refers to the fact that there are some rocks present, but you can find mosses and even soil, debris and things of the sorts. What it refers to is that these orchids grow into a fluffy and light type of medium, decaying and decomposing leaves, but not clay type of medium, not heavy soil. So starting from this idea, I thought, well, maybe semi-hydro is not actually suited for terrestrials. You might know that I do believe semi-hydro, at least in my environment, is not all that great with terrestrials. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna start with changing the medium. So that's what I did. So first of all, this guy, this is a newer Paph. I just forgot to tell you about him. I purchased him from eBay. He's a Paphiopedilum philippinense crossed with Nevium. He's from Catasetum 2. Although this doesn't look like a Catasetum 2 tag, who knows, maybe he purchased it from somewhere else. But he's a lovely cross. He's supposed to have pink blooms. Can you imagine pink slipper orchids? Anyway, so he actually has never been placed in semi-hydroponics because I had this suspicion a long time ago, from the beginning of the year kinda, that my mottled-leaf Paphs might not be okay with semi-hydro. So since the beginning he has been placed in a terrestrial mix, and what he has here is some coconut husk, bark, and coconut coir. I want to remove it from this mix because I didn't use a good brand. I found a better brand now, so I'm gonna use that. And here are some pebbles that I just had lying around. So this is the mix he's in. It's a terrestrial mix. And ever since I potted him in this medium, he grew. He arrived with this leaf, which was grown up until here. You can actually see the sign. And then it grew more in my care, and then it grew this leaf. 2 months ago, the leaf was really tiny, as you can see on the screen, so he grew beautifully. I don't have any leaf tip dieback with this orchid. Whatever damage you see, this was present when I purchased him. I purchased him at the end of last year, I think. But he was a solitary purchase, so no reason to do an unboxing. So with this one, I really didn't have any issues, but he has never set foot in semi-hydroponics. But now let's talk about the ones that did. Alrighty, this is my climber Paphiopedilum. Not sure if it's a Maudiae, doesn't really look that way. So this guy always had issues. You can see a remain here, and if we look back at that video from a couple of months ago, you can see that this one was already potted in terrestrial mix. This was the very first one that I repotted when I started suspecting that semi-hydro was not appropriate for them. So at the moment when I repotted him, he did have a leaf tip dieback on this one. Then I repotted him, and ever since, you can see, no more issues. Well, this is an old leaf. This is the old growth in the back. New growth though, no more issues. This one, what he has here, he doesn't have terrestrial mix. It's actually a mixture of pebbles with coconut coir, the fine stuff. Again, I plan to repot him in a more airy medium. So far, he didn't fuss with this medium, but it's a little tricky, it's a little too fine. But the main idea is this. There is no more leaf tip dieback, and you can see from the footage from a couple of months ago, he grew a lot. So the change for this guy has been beneficial. No more leaf tip dieback, perfect growth, fast growth, everything is okay. Next up, here we have the Paphiopedilum vinicolor. It is a complex hybrid, actually. I'm not entirely sure what exactly it is. He does have mottled leaves though. So with this guy, I had the leaf tip dieback as well, and you can see remnants in the past here. This is an old leaf that I really need to cut at this point. So when I repotted this guy in the terrestrial mix, he already had this leaf affected, and these leaves were tinier. Ever since then, no more leaf tip dieback. As you can see, nothing of the sorts. And yet again, I feel like the orchid grew a lot faster ever since I repotted him. He spotted in a terrestrial mix just like the other one, the first one that I showed you, but you can see a few pebbles. Well, those pebbles are actually grit. Let me show you. That's what it is. It's actually crushed seashells and a few other pebbles, but mostly seashells. I was actually inspired by Schroeder with this. If you've ever ordered from Schroeder, you know that some of their orchids, including the Paphiopedilums, have a mixture of bark and all those fun stuff with crushed shells. There's a reason for that. I actually used the fertilizer from Schroeder. It was lacking calcium. Schroeder does not use osmosis water or purified water with their orchids, as far as I know. They use their main line, which has calcium, and they also supplement to some orchids the crushed shells. They don't do this for everybody, but with the Paphiopedilums, I remember they did. And so they supplement calcium through other means. They don't put it in the fertilizer because it would be too much. So I thought, well, alrighty then, maybe it's a calcium thing with my Paphs, who knows? Let's find some crushed seashells. I could not find them. The next best thing is this one, and it's perfectly fine, I think. Now, this is not an orchid intended product. Take it as it is. It doesn't have my seal of approval. It's just my own experiment here. Don't take it as a orchid approved product, alrighty? So that's what's inside this medium. You can see it's quite a lot of it. And really honestly, I don't think that the grit made such a difference. I feel like the other Paphs which don't have the grit did just as well. But what's important is that this guy got repotted from semi-hydro into a terrestrial mix. Grit, no grit, doesn't really matter. And he stopped having issues. Again, I feel the growth has accelerated. He grows much faster than he did a couple of months ago. Mind you, you might say, well, it's the warm temperature. Oh no, I have warm temperature from February in my area. It's pretty much always summer here, except for 2 or 3 months. Also, these guys sit under artificial light, which is always constant. It's 12 hours or more per day. So I tend to think that seasons and day length and temperature has nothing to do with it. So this has been the vinicolor. Again, same story. There was another Paphiopedilum here, but he's in the lechuza system right now. And oh boy, don't I have an update for the lechuza system. We'll see about it tomorrow because I'm gonna film it right after this video. I don't want to include him since he's involved in other projects. And lastly, this is my Maudiae that I left in semi-hydro. Why? because control. Let's see if in semi-hydroponics the issues just to eliminate the luck factor or the coincidence factor. Everything else looks okay, but there was a chance that if I left them in semi-hydro, they would have been okay still. So I only left one of them. I know it's a small group, but it's not nothing. There we have it. Let's remember how this guy looked like just a couple of months ago. I'm so glad I do videos sometimes. Look at him. Does he have any dieback? Let's see. The growth that has dieback now is the growth furthest away from the older growth with the dieback here. In the video, as you can see, there is no dieback on that leaf. Whatever happened here happened afterwards. And with this guy, I tried to apply the same principle as with the Paphiopedilums. More frequent watering. Introduce another watering in between. It didn't cut it. It didn't solve the problem. And I do suspect that what I had on the Paphiopedilums is really not the same as what I have here. Or the two plants are just so different that a little bit more water doesn't really help it. Maybe the problem was of a different nature. So the one that I left in semi-hydro still has issues. It might be a coincidence at this point. There is, the group is tiny. I cannot test on 1, 2, 3, 4 orchids and draw a general conclusion. But it's just such a coincidence that all of the others that I transferred are okay now, and the single one that I did not transfer and who did not have any damage 2 months ago has damage now. So to me that says something. That says that there is a very high chance that my mottled-leafed Paphiopedilums will do better in a terrestrial mix in my environment. I'm sure there are people even throughout you guys who can do semi-hydro with mottled leaves with Maudiae types perfectly. It might just have to do with the environment, and I do have a suspicion about that. I'm thinking it is actually a more mechanical reason than this. I'm thinking it has to do with the quantity of air semi-hydro offers. Yes, semi-hydro is supposed to be a pretty wet environment, but at the same time, it's supposed to be a very airy environment as well. Paphiopedilums generally do not grow aerial roots. They're not epiphytic, and even if they try to produce aerial roots, most of the times, if not all of the times, the roots just stop growing. Rarely do new roots continue growth if you bury them afterwards, after you notice the damage. Semi-hydro is a very airy medium, particularly at the top, and particularly in my environment, which no matter what, I cannot control. It's summertime, 9 months a year for me here. I'm thinking that for these orchids, this is really not okay, because I actually noticed something while repotting these guys. The quantity of roots. They seem to not grow as well as they used to, and I'm thinking air pockets that are just so severe due to my climate that the root system doesn't develop properly. If the root system doesn't develop properly, it doesn't absorb water properly either. If the orchid doesn't have enough hydration within its system, other components and chemicals might become more concentrated. If that happens, I might start to see visual signs of this. And also, coupled with the fact that the root system simply does not want to grow to its full potential, I believe constant issues. Maybe the pH of the leca had something to do with it as well. So with the pH, yes, my leca, the one that I used for about 6 months, it continuously raises the pH of the water. Even if I prepare it, even if I soak it for a few days in acidified water and all of that fun stuff, it just doesn't. It doesn't work with this brand. I'm sure there are brands which are completely inert. This one is not. The IKEA one for me is not either. So at least for a few months, the leca raises pH. Afterwards, it does indeed pipe down slowly but surely, so that's great. However, my Paphs were in semi-hydro for longer than 6 months, at least some of them. So I tend to believe the pH of the situation was not really the culprit. My suspicion is the airiness of the medium, coupled with my environment, which doesn't really do anything for the Paphs in semi-hydro. And overall, I do suspect that a terrestrial mix does better simply because it's not as airy. It doesn't have as many air pockets. Even though it is free-flowing, it is well-draining, it's not proper soil, it's not suffocating, it just maintains more humidity, more even, actually, throughout the medium for the Paphiopedilum roots, and I think that's the issue. Furthermore, if indeed it was an issue with the pH, the terrestrial mix has a slightly acidic pH. This should be favorable for nutrient absorption. There was also, of course, the option of calcium deficiency. I suspect it's not that because my issues were on old growth as well as new growth. Calcium usually appears on new growth, not on old growth. Since I am using fertilizers which contain calcium, also I am using my tap water which is high in calcium. Also, I placed this grit thing, which I don't think did anything. Anyway, I do have calcium for my Paphs, and I want to make a point about the calcium. If indeed it was a calcium issue, it would have appeared on the green-leafed multiflorals that we saw yesterday. Remember, I wanted to make a point about the calcium? Those ones need calcium as well. Apparently, the calcium that I provide is okay for those orchids. It should be okay for these ones as well. My suspicion and experience and knowledge says it's not a calcium issue. I know everybody talks about calcium now. It will pipe down. Supplementing calcium or Super Thrive or things of the sorts is actually not the answer to every problem we have, but it is important to correctly diagnose issues. And a calcium deficiency, you would know it pretty much if you'd have it. I'll link you down below to an article by the St. Augustine Orchid Society, which explains, I feel, very well what calcium deficiency looks like, how it is and where it manifests in their experience, and you can extrapolate to other orchids as well. So that's calcium deficiency. Dieback on the leaves, not calcium deficiency necessarily. It could be over-fertilizing, it could be dehydration signs. So the bottom line, I suspect the airiness and simple incompatibility with my environment, semi-hydro, these orchids, it simply didn't do well due to the overall airiness of the medium. So I will transfer this guy to a terrestrial mix as well. We're gonna come back, of course, with updates, and fingers crossed that this was the end of it. As much as I dislike really bark and terrestrial mixes, hey, you know what? It's not always going to be my way, right? And to maintain these orchids healthy, if this is what it takes, then this is what it takes. I'll just make sure that I don't have 50 Paphs in my collection. Other than that, there we go. Semi-hydro is not the answer for everything. I wish it were. It's not. What can we do? We need to adapt. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting, and tomorrow we're gonna talk about the lechuza. Oh boy, gosh dang it. I'll see you in tomorrow's video. You know the drill. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, updates, experiments, Q&As, all those fun stuff. And if you like YouTube to notify you whenever I upload a new video, just turn on all notifications for my channel. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!